Welcome back to Final Fantasy XIII, and we're still in the most boring dungeon in the entire game, the fucking Vile Peaks. It's just rocks, and they're
honestly, Pedro, I have to wonder, what helps you decide what it is the most boring dungeon in this game, because they get pretty boring, all of them. Well, okay, when they're not terrible.
Well, this one looks boring even visually, because most of the time this game at the very least looks nice visually. Vile Peaks doesn't even have that. Vile Peaks just looks boring.
You know what this feels like? This feels like a game full of dungeons akin to the train graveyard from 7 Remake. You know, that one dungeon that a lot of people have issues with because it feels like it drags on and kind of feels like a weird space block in the plot here. Granted, I guess to be fair, these dungeons arguably, for the most part, are more connected to their narrative. But this one, all it gives us is basically stuff about this war that happened a while ago. Hi, Final Fantasy VII. And while that does tie into some of the characters, does not really do much for the plot.
Not during the war, and not since. They might have tried, but none of their forces made it into Cocoon. They only damaged the outer rim. Then the Sanctum's Fal'Cie pushed them back. What'd you, sleep through history?
More or less. So, what's a ship from Post doing here?
Once the war was over, people couldn't live near the rim anymore. Places like the Hanging Edge. So the Fal'Cie, they gathered up scrap from Pulse and used it for rebuilding here. This is what was left. A bunch of garbage.
Who'd have done?
Just like snow.
You know what's the sad part? You know what's the sad part, guys? That thing that Hope just said about the discussion what he was done, like, and all that was left of a bunch of... Yeah, what Hope basically says can be applied to the development of this game, actually. So... Oh boy. That's the sad part, like, after the war, the Fal'Cie basically left everything here to get rebuilt, and all that's left is a bunch of garbage. Yeah, pretty much, like, but again, when I talk about the development history of this game, we'll talk about it. Anyway, to elaborate, everybody, like, we're talking about the War of Transgression, which we will read in a moment in the data log via the History and Myth section. So just give me a moment. Here you go. History and Myth, the War of Transgression. Let's see what that is. Several hundred years ago, the armies of Pulse attempted to invade Cocoon because they're assholes in a conflict known today as the War of Transgression. The Sanctum Fal'Cie were able to repel the lower world forces before they breached Cocoon's interior, but not before they managed to seriously damage areas near the outwards outer rim. We'll talk about what exactly happened that later. Details surrounding the clash remain shrouded in mystery, which is what the plot is about. But the government's swift and decisive response to this violent Pulse and transgression minimized casualties and greatly boosted public faith in both the Sanctum and the Fal'Cie. So basically, the guys at Pulse are assholes and decide, you know what, let's invade Cocoon for some reason.
There is entire reason.
Hope already talked about this too. Go ahead.
The entire reason why Pulse and Cocoon are at war to begin with is something that the game doesn't really tell you, and it's connected to the larger Pablo Nova Crystallis mythos, so I will save it for
for later. No, I know what you mean here. But you see, this is what the data log should have been used for. The characters talked a bit about the lore, but if you either forgot about something or you want to learn a bit more about it, just go to the data log and read it there. That's what it should have been used for, not explaining stuff that happened either off screen or, you know, or it's like
way
stuff
later.
You just jump in expecting to the game expects you to know, even though this is like your first time in this universe.
Like, here's the dealio with the data log quiz. You will eventually learn all you need to know in the plot. However, if you want to know it at the proper pace to get what's going on with the story, you need to check it constantly. They eventually explain some stuff, but that's like way later into the game, like to the point where it is beyond ridiculous how long you have to wait until you get that explanation.
The game demands way too much patience from the audience and just leaves them out to dry. And it's just not. That's not how a good craftsman handles his story. It's just not. But you want to know the sad part, Twibs? There's actually some details about the past of the Fabula Nova blah 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 mythology. Well, I'll wait till I have this cutscene.
Lightning, scouting ahead.
Welcome to the party.
You miss us?
Huh. Would it kill her to smile?
I know, right? Well, you know what's interesting? You know what's interesting, Fiendwebs? They explain why exactly Lightning is so stoic. When and where, you might ask? At the ending of Lightning Returns. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding when I say that.
Although, to be fair, doesn't that explain more so why she's stoic in that game in particular as opposed to the entire franchise?
Oh, no. The whole lifeless voice thing is explained that God took away her apathy in that third game. But that ending thing with Lumina is about explaining why exactly she's always been kind of stoic and everything like throughout the entirety. Like, remember, they say it very clearly in that ending. Like, it's not just about that game; it's about her Lightning's life in general. But
That's
anyway,
the thing, though, as we pointed out, she wasn't always this stoic, as we literally saw in, one of the 13 days cutscenes.
well, Jova, that's probably because Toriyama probably forgot what story he was even telling at that point when he got to the third game, because it's remember, Jova, each individual game in this trilogy basically abandons whatever the previous game was doing anyway. So
Okay, Pedro, to be honest with me, has there been a bigger mess that Square Enix, or, any section of Square Enix has made that is a bigger mess than the 13 franchise as a
I will argue not.
You have to be specific on that term, Jova.
I think he means it a mess of the storyline.
Yeah, because otherwise, Jova will gladly tell you things night.
Or that one movie that they tried making.
Peace Within, but that
story-wise,
as much as weird and out there it is, story-wise, Peace Within is fairly easy to comprehend.
Oh no,
pretty much.
It's not really a satisfying story.
The problem Spirits Within is not that it's convoluted or incomprehensible. It's more so that it's bland as all shit.
And dumb at times.
By your own admission, well, not necessarily by your own admission, but something that you and the others noted, Jova. While most of the single story arcs can be easily understandable, on the whole, I guess you can feel Legend of Mana in terms of narrative mess.
I mean, okay. When I'm talking about a narrative mess, I mean like the complete package. Like, confusing narratives, stupid narratives, plot points that don't go anywhere or go to incredibly terrible conclusions, essentially. Like, let me put it like this. Legend of Mana...
Parasite Eve, the third birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, there sounds like there's an interesting story behind that.
Let me put it this way, Jova.
Spoilers, so let me put it in the simplest way possible. Let's see if it sounds familiar to you. A franchise that had a clear direction, mind you, there are specific reasons why they did that, but give me a second. A franchise was going to a specific direction, suddenly gets a new sequel entry that introduces time travel and shifting, into the equation, and retcons a lot of stuff and makes the narrative very confused to follow compared to the previous two titles. It's basically kind of similar to 13-2, and surprise, Toriyama worked on that. Mind you, even Hajime Tabata worked on that, and it seems that whenever it comes to shitposting on Final Fantasy, people can't seem to decide which person to blame, but gotta be honest, I'm blaming the whole team, in a sense, because I genuinely don't understand why they decided to go that route. The problem with Parasite Eve, in case no one knows, is that it's actually, technically speaking, this
cutscene's important.
Yeah, the next boss fight too. I'll mention it later.
Oh wait, is it the boss battle first? Yeah, I think it's first.
Yeah.
Okay.
With two phases to boot, the Dreadnought.
Oh boy.
Wait a minute, it's that train enemy from Final Fantasy VII.
It does look similar, so I can understand why Veggie's confused.
Also, the SG6 that you're talking about with the Phantom train.
No.
No. Talking about the...
He's talking about that other machine monster in 7 that kind of looks similar to this too. Let me put it this way, Jova. While it's not so much that 13 Trilogy is the biggest convoluted, messy storyline they've ever created. It's more so that the 13 Trilogy is the more notorious one because, well, it's Final Fantasy, so obviously people aren't going to pick more. It's going to be the one that most people know about. Whereas Third Birthday is mostly just known within the Final Fantasy fans, and
also for the fact that it was just for the PSP, while this for more the home console market was more popular to begin with. But again,
sounds amazing that one game could somehow do more damage than an entire trilogy to its own narrative.
It's a bit of a problem because, like it was mentioned, Parasite Eve is technically speaking a licensed IP. It's not an original property because it's based on a Japanese movie. Hold on. We need a second phase. There we go. Also, I think we're missing a sound effect or two for that.
I know, right? Also,
You alright?
Keep in mind too.
I kind of like. Sorry, go on.
Keep in mind too, I'm trying my best to keep this PC port duct taped together.
No, I understand. Well, it has been, until that point anyway, so there's...
Well, no, that's the thing too. Next time I'm walking the map, notice how there's the occasional brief little moments where the frame rate kind of drops to 0 for like a half a second or something. It's because while modders have done their best to try to duct tape this shit, it really gets to a point where it's just like it's very hard to get this thing running at optimal conditions.
Anyway, so I've got a comparison, Jova. Imagine if Resident Evil never became the original activity it was, and most of its early titles were still based on the Haunted House NES video game, that Capcom did that was based off a movie. That kind of thought process. The problem is that the Square, right, renewing the license on the long run was kind of a bit in the atmosphere. That's why after Final Fantasy 2 they kind of stopped and at best re-released the games for the PlayStation Network system, But then when they came to the third birthday, they did all they could to try to cut around the license just by having, the protagonist Aya Brea, which was not a character in the movie, so it makes sense of why they would be able to use her, and to try to remove as much as possible references to stuff that in the previous games were connected to the movie. However, in doing so, they created this bizarre, again, time travel-esque story that it leaves just such a bad taste in your mouth at the end. And ever since we haven't touched it. The closest we got was an Aya Brea Easter egg in 2015 in the first trailer for the 7 remake, but that's that.
And it was a PSP exclusive on top of that. Again.
To boot it up cross-promotion, hold on, first we're about to get to the
Custom expanded. Lightning win the medic role and Saz won the commander role.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, considering the primary role that Lightning specializes at the beginning are Commander, Medic, and Black Ravager. She's basically the equivalent of a Red Mage.
Yep.
Soldiers in the field fight blind.
That's stupid.
Yeah, I noticed that. But don't you need to know exactly what you're up against?
Target's a target.
Yes.
It's more like following orders, but sure.
And you're telling me that no soldiers had trouble with that? Again, this is something that will later be contradicted in the future by the narrative.
The game is trying to do the whole... hold on. You can upgrade weapons and accessories at save stations using OmniKit, and the various components you... Don't worry, Taylor, I'll cover it. First, approach a save station and press A to access it. Then select Upgrade from the save station menu to access the workbench. Now,
well, that sounds simple enough.
It is, actually.
The
problem is just the idea in itself.
It's not so much that it's simple. I'll explain. After choosing upgrade, select the weapon or accessory that you wish to improve. Next, you will need to select the type of component you wish to use for the... You know what? I'm just going to explain this because even the tutorial for this thing doesn't really do a good job explaining. Here's what it boils down to. You can level up your weapons and equipment too, as well as your characters. Here's how, you may ask. Every time you beat a battle, you get various materials that you can use. You can apply those materials to your weapon, which will make them gain experience, which makes them level up. Eventually, they'll also reach level star, which means it's maximum level, meaning there's another rarer, more expensive material that you can use to maybe transform it into a different weapon, and you can just keep going until it becomes the most powerful
in the process
version of the equipment.
Potentially gaining some abilities too.
Exactly. Here's the problem. It comes across as while it sounds decent on paper of an idea, the execution really is fucked up. Why? Because let's say you start leveling up Lightning's first weapon that we have now.
The Blaze Fire Saber.
By the time we get to level 16, 17, 18 with this thing, and then you get to a point where you find a new weapon, even on treasure chest or on the shop, that new weapon will be at level 1, meaning it will be incredibly weaker than your current weapon that's already leveled up to level 16. Meaning you have to start the process all over again and level up that weapon again and hope that that weapon will eventually become stronger than the current one you have at level 16. So basically, it really the whole system basically completely shoots itself in the ass by making it so that, okay, so basically what you're telling me is that I might as well just pick one weapon and one accessory for each character, or at least how many accessories they can equip for each character, and just keep leveling that shit up, because trying to level up every single possible weapon in the game is way too time consuming and really makes it wonder why did they even bother, in my opinion at least, with it.
There's totally a trophy for that, isn't there?
Yes.
Except for the fact that each weapon also holds innate abilities, and you kind of need some of them to actually fight the tougher enemies in the game. So you still need to actually change and experiment with different weapons that can actually have decent abilities. Like, to give you an idea, Jova, while it's a bit hard to synthesize, but there is an ability that allows you to have a minor percentage chance to inflict an instant stagger onto the enemy, regardless of at what point the stagger gauge is. It's actually required for one of the hunts in the game.
Anyway, let me finish. Like, and yeah, well, Teo is correct on that front, because yes, but look at this from the perspective of someone who's, at least for now, just trying to complete the main story, because it really is one of those cases where it just comes across as even the gameplay in this game is more complicated than it needs to be. What happened, like Spoonie put it very well, what was wrong with the older Final Fantasy games where you would just get a new weapon and you would just check if it's stronger or weaker than the current one you have? Like, why do you have to have this extra level of unnecessarily complexity to your equipment? Like,
well, you see, there's a simple explanation for that.
Go on.
We want to try something new for the sake of doing something new.
Yeah, that's what this is.
I think that it didn't work.
This kind of model of upgrading your weapon, then evolving them when they reach a level cap on their own, it's something that was already common in any kind of other games. Like, say, the first I can immediately come out with that is this Gaia, for example, you know. But later on, even mobile games will start using this particular tactic for the equipment that you can give to your characters.
To be fair, though, the difference is that often those weapons would have more drastically different properties, or at the very least, their strength would scale here and there.
Yeah, you have to understand.
At least it didn't feel like an immediate downgrade whenever you traded to a new weapon. Where this game, well, if you're leveling the weapons as the game opts for you to, it will feel like a downgrade if you go to a new weapon. Oh, sure, you can level it up, but that just feels like it's wasting more time.
Not just that, I haven't even gotten to the bigger waste of time, Jova. The materials themselves, because how much experience you can give to a weapon at a time depends on what kind of materials you have. Because some materials are so shit they only give 1 XP to the weapon. So basically, not only do you need to get materials, you need to get the correct materials so that the leveling up will not take fucking ages. So
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like something you'd hear out of a free-to-play game.
They are divided in categories, like say slime stuff or cogs, for example, and some of them are give more experience to some particular types of weapons. Problem is that there's not much matching when it comes to that. You think that something like, say, gears would be more useful to something like, say, Sass's guns, you know, in terms of actually powering them up. But no, it's kind of like randomized.
Allow me, not just that. Allow me to also say this.
Using a guide won't help you, it sounds like.
No, well, it does.
For each playthrough, but it's more of a case, it's randomized for each weapon type.
No, it is, Joe, but at the same time, I think Marcel put it best. I hate it when a guide is necessary to play a game, because it really is one of those. Because it's not even just like, okay, it's not even a matter of like, this is a flat out proper core mechanic of the gameplay. Like, if it was something like necessary for defeating a final boss, that's fine. But this is the primary mechanic that the game puts front and center as a primary way of getting stronger. You know, but the part is no, let me finish. Okay. Not to mention, how much XP a material gives to a weapon also depends on the weapon itself, because a piece of material will give more XP to specific weapons than others. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, okay, so maybe if I need to get a specific material for a specific weapon, I just go back to that whatever those monsters were and fight them some more so I can farm more materials. Remember, every time in this game you leave an area, you cannot go back.
And not only that, let's not forget about the level cap. So even if you're trying to compensate for the fact that your weapon isn't at its highest by, just trying to level up your characters, that stupid level cap keeps you from, grinding low enough to become strong.
It's the same problem I have with
you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't you?
It's a clear case of the gameplay is clearly in whoever was the game director of this game, because I know Toriyama was the scenario director. No, I don't know, somebody else I'm pretty sure was the game director. The game director is in complete denial of the shallow gameplay system he created here. Look at the Crystarium, for example, that we're looking at right now. Why even make me have to hold the A button for this? What's the point? Just have the character level up and give him bonuses like you do in Final Fantasy IV. There's no need to force the player.
Doesn't it make you feel like you're on an adventure?
No, it does not.
The Crystarian map, going from dot to dot on the
galaxy
line.
Unlike with the sphere grid, there's no flexibility in how you make your character progress, so there's literally no need to force the player to come into the stupid menu and just hold A until you're out of CP. Just have the character level up with XP and give him bonuses like in Final Fantasy IV. If there's not going to be any choices in how you progress with the skill tree, don't even bother having the skill tree. It makes the skill tree pointless. It's just a waste of the player's time.
But Pedro, it looks so gorgeous.
Not really. Like, even in 2010, I don't even think that looks all that pretty, to be honest with you.
Well, honestly, that's the only reason I can figure why they did it this way, because otherwise, functionally, it don't make any sense.
So yeah, it's not just the story. It's not just the story. The gameplay is also incredibly shallow and in complete denial, and tries to mask its shallowness by putting all these bells and whistles in front of. Oh, look, you can go into the Crystarium and pick all these things all these bonuses to your character. You can go into your equipment and you can level up said equipment and everything, but. All it does is basically try to disguise the fact that this is a very shallow gameplay experience where you're just railroaded into hallways and just battling monsters. And later on, when we get to the side quests in this game, it boils down to just killing more monsters. Which again, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of JRPGs that have bounty quests. That's the whole thing, but. Usually JRPGs always have other types of activities to mix things up. This game doesn't have any kind of minigames, any kind of gold saucer style areas. It doesn't have anything to break out the monotony of the core gameplay loop. Go on.
To compare this to Final Fantasy VIII, that's a game that also had a bit of weird busy work implemented. However, drastic difference. If you did know enough how the system worked, you could still make it work to your favor here and there. And there wasn't any stupid limits that, pretty much would force you to have to play the game a certain way.
Oh, no. Anyone who knows...
To play it at your own pace, you could probably still be fine in 8. Not with this game, though. With this game, you march at the game's beat of its own drums here.
And 8 actually had stuff to do aside from battling. So...
That too, and that's the thing. We only start getting these side quests past the halfway point of the game.
Past the halfway point, Joe. But try more the last four. The last more like I don't know even that too. I would argue more like the last 4. Remember, we only get to Grand Pulse in chapter 11. Allow me to remind you, this game has 13 chapters. So yeah, by the time you get to Grand Pulse, you're pretty much almost done with the game.
That is true, but chapter 11 is also the longest in the entire game. So it's not a thing like each chapter is the same length.
I
will give it this, though. Okay, if you're going strictly off of this game in chapters, though, Chapter 11 is still a pretty far ways away from where we are currently. Like, this game is insane with its priorities.
Well, it's another sign of the development, but again, we'll get into that. Guesto, go on.
I haven't found the person that you were looking for, a game director. The closest I can imagine would be, I guess, the main programmer, which in this case is Yoshiki Kashitani. I don't know who this person is, but I found something interesting in the meantime. Guess what, Pedro?
What?
Toriyama was not the cutscene director in this game.
That's surprising.
Kobayashi,
well, he was.
Which I don't know nothing about.
Well, yeah, he was still. Remember too. He's still the overall main director, regardless. But yeah, that is surprising. Well, to be fair to this game's cutscenes while there is the occasional ass shot here and there, it's nowhere near as prevalent as in the 10 duology, to be fair. So there is that. What was I going to say? Yeah, it really is a case of you really have to wonder what the bloody hell is happening here, because the gameplay is shallow as all hell. It really is. And anyway, I'm trying to showcase all these materials that I just bought from Lenora's Garage, aka one of the many stores you can get from the neural network. As you can see, each individual gives different types of experience. Meaning, and remember, most of these stuff that I just bought, I bought because I'm cheating and I'm having max cash on me. So if I wasn't cheating, I would have to rely on shitty materials that only give like 2 XP a piece or something. So this entire process of leveling up weapons is something that lasts a long time if you're playing it fairly. As a result, by the time you get a new weapon and you're like, level 11 with Lightning's Gladius, you're just like, okay, I'm not really tempted to start leveling up this weapon again because it's going to be another long, tedious process. So it really creates this vicious cycle of, you take a long time, very tediously, leveling up a weapon, but then you find a new weapon and you're like, I'm not gonna start the process all over again. Fuck that noise. It really is a case.
That looked like it came straight out of The World Ends With You.
It's just busy work.
That chibi art you mean for Lenora's Garage?
Yeah, it does. I can see what the Java means.
Lenora's Garage. Whoever. Oh, right. Lenora.
Anyway.
There are some minor Easter eggs, like there's the B&W company, which stands for Biggs and Wedge. And one of the later actually shops that you get is actually a weapon shop that is run by Gilgamesh, and this gets even acknowledged in later games.
Yeah, that's the big problem with Final Fantasy 13. Like, it tries to distract you, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. It tries to distract you with all these bells and whistles so that you don't notice how shallow the whole thing really is.
Yeah. That's why I was like, hey, you guys remember Snow? As a friend, like, yeah, that was a thing.
Hold on. Yes, Shiroi?
The bells and whistles aren't even that good to make up.
They aren't.
They are not, no.
The graphics are really good.
Yeah, the graphics are really good,
Just
but
like the music being good in a Sonic game, that's the very least we expect.
it's one of those things where it's mostly because it's just busy work. It's busy work. This game just makes you feel like you're making busy work. Like it's like, for example, I talked about the rankings. I've been talking about how I've been getting 5-star ranks over and over. Here's what you guys do. If you guys want to have yourselves a headache, go on Google and look up for the formula of how the game calculates your star rank, because the formula that this game has is a very convoluted, because of course it is, convoluted method of how the star work. You probably would think it's just, you just complete the battle with as much health as possible and defeat the enemies as quickly as possible, right? In theory, that kind of tends to work most of the time. However, if you actually look the way the game is programmed and how the rankings are performed, there's this big complicated formula that calculates various elements of how the battle goes, and it's just this convoluted. Why can't it just be enough that I complete the battle fast?
Also, Shiori, yeah, I agree. Why do you think I hate Sonic Genesis so much?
Well, yeah.
I just want to cap this off by mentioning this. When you get down to it, the gameplay when you're actually playing it is so easy and so straightforward thanks to the Libra system that you barely do anything. Yet everything circling around it is busy work. So essentially, in order to play a very lackluster experience where you're pretty much pressing the confirmation button all this time, you're doing all this busy work to make sure that it's, simple like that, instead of just, a slog to get through. Because if you don't set stuff up right, eventually the game's going to catch up with you, and then... it's not like your tactics will change much because the game will always choose the right spell for you. It's literally just a matter of you gotta be strong enough.
Hell, fucking Kena is not even an RPG, and it handled the skill tree concept better than this game because the skill tree actually allows you to choose what stuff you get first. And like I've mentioned in that playthrough, I recommend trying to get the hammer ability as soon as you can, because it's very powerful and can be very helpful. So there you go. If a player who knows what he's doing can get himself ahead if he using the skill tree properly. See, but no, in this game, no, you just boot out. There's no choices. You just hold A, and the thing will just go for this linear path where you can't make. It's not like you can. It's not like you ever get to a point where you can choose to get either HP plus or strength plus. There's technically branches. The occasional branch here and there, but it's one of those cases where it's just like, well, eventually you're gonna get those anyway, because why wouldn't you? It would be dumb to not do so. Like, it really is one of those cases where it's just, it's mind-boggling. All right, everybody, tune in next time. Hopefully we'll find out what exactly our plan is, because I have yet to realize what our plan is exactly.
I can tell you what the plan is. There is none.
There is no plan. Okay.
Heroes don't need plans, guys.
See ya.
See ya.